Showtime.
I sent you all some information, well, some questions that Ron and I had come up with. But I'm gonna break away a little bit from that because I want you to tell me first about how you got involved in the fight against the pipeline and why. The originally, when they announced it, what was your reaction? And when you became aware of the pipeline's route, what were your reactions? And Cabell, we can start with you.
Well, I remember my first interface with the Dominion, with the pipeline at all, was when they came to make the presentation to the county at the high school. And so there was this stage with these guys in suits up there with their, boards with all the information about how wonderful it was going to be. And my initial reaction was no, because it looked like it was coming pretty close to our farm. And we ended up being we were never right on the pipeline, but we were in something that was called the burn zone. So that immediately, that was not such a fun thing to be thinking about. And then as I looked into, and then I think that right after that was when Friends of Nelson started, right?
Right.
Immediately after, if I'm not mistaken.
Around that time.
Yeah. Immediately around that time. And my feeling was that these were, okay, this is totally personal, right? My feeling was that these were guys in suits who thought they were going to be dealing with a not very informed public. And as it turned out, they were totally wrong, and they didn't realize, how many very, very smart, very educated, very committed people around there were, and they didn't realize at all how much of a groundswell there would be. I just don't think that they just didn't get it at all from the start. They thought it was going to be really easy.
Yeah.
From the beginning, they underestimated Nelson County. So
yeah, they thought we were rubes.
Yeah.
So, how did you find out about it, and what was your first reaction?
Well, around the same time, and I got involved when Friends of Nelson was just starting, and I remember talking to a couple of people who said, well, there's some families in the Wingina area that are going to be very disproportionately, impacted, and hasn't been that much attention at this point paid, that we need somebody to go down and work in that area. And then I figured out that was Reverend Rose's family, and we've been very good friends for years, and that's how I got involved. And actually did not even know Cabell. We did not know each other before.
No, we didn't know each other before the pipeline at all.
Right. And so I started meeting with Reverend Rose and documenting the impact, and then he, of course, got others involved in that area. So we were not initially on the route when I first became involved. It was just an interest in that area, and always being concerned about the African American community and the Native American community. And so I kind of, in a way, became, by default, the lead person in that part of the county to start to work with families and lead opposition efforts.
Tell me what that was like. I mean, you started making phone calls or visiting people to find out who was affected, and
exactly.
And what were you saying to those people?
Well, I mean, the people, of course, were very upset. They didn't have a really in-depth, understanding of what that meant. But I think Friends of Nelson started out it was great with all of the information and talking points. And Reverend Rose really took the lead, because it went through a huge amount of his family property. And then we just got together with other people in the community and explained, what was happening, and also what they could expect, that they would be getting communication from ACP, from Dominion, about that they were on the route, and that they would get letters requesting surveys. And so we had prepared people, and that was really very important to get early on, to get people to understand what was going to happen. But it became very press-worthy. The original article I found, the first article on Reverend Rose, was from that Seville weekly paper. It was from October of 2014. And then I am trying to think how I got connected with Michael Martz at the Richmond Times. Did you?
I worked in the news biz, and I called the Richmond Times, and he had been reporting on something that was in the same area, and I said, listen, there's a I go back and forth between, I don't live here permanently, so I was like, well, I won't be there, but if you can come to Nelson County, I can set you up with someone who can take you around.
Yeah.
And he was very interested.
Right.
And he became interested in the story, and then kept coming back, and really was a huge advocate. I mean, didn't write advocacy journalism, but just got the facts out, which were a kind of, they advocated for us themselves, the facts.
He came in December of 2014 and did a site visit of the area. At that point, the St. Hebron, the historical African-American church, was going right behind there. And he came, and several people in the community met, and he did a very good spread about the impact, particularly on the African-American and the Monacan historic sites. And it kind of took off there in terms of attention. And then FERC came to do a site visit of the area. That was in that same period. And then there were other, news articles about that. So I do think that when I was looking at some of the articles from the early times, and there was a big interest in the historical impact on the Windjine and the Warminster Historic and the African American, the Native American. That was something that really got some traction in the media stories. So, and the company, because they did change the route, but then of course they just put it on the other side of 56 to other African American families, but they did pay attention.
Well, I think, but I think one of the things that happened was we all got educated about kind of how the system works. Mm-hmm. Like what does FERC do, and how does it work? And you have to get, if you want to talk to them, you have to get into their matrix. You have to be a whatever. What were you called if you could write a letter? I've forgotten what it is. Anyway, you had to get into the system, and then you found out. Oh well, there was the historic properties. The Department of Historic Resources had a part in this too. So mm-hmm. At every point, you were learning what you had to kind of go through and what you had to do. And it was an education for everybody. Mm-hmm. And not to mention, I don't know what I would be interested in, because my property, I wasn't asked about, I never had to say, oh, don't get, I wasn't specifically asked about eminent domain on my property. But how did you prepare people? What was the preparation package that you gave to, that you sort of furnished people with? I mean, did you say okay, well, the first thing you have to do is get the specifics of what they're, actually ask for the piece of paper that they're asked for what they, you know what I'm saying?
Well, okay. I think earlier on we were more focused on the denying of survey in the Wingina area, and people and really documenting the impact personally on people and on their land, and particularly a lot of these families that have held onto their land for generations. So at first it was I think more of press and kind of public education. Because that was one of the, I don't know if that was the original or one of the original routes. But then later on, as we got more sophisticated, and then our land ended up on one of the alternative routes, that's when we went into this major effort and worked a lot with Ron and did the Dear Neighbor letters, identified everybody on the route, and wrote letters, went door to door, identified which people were just landowners but didn't live in the area, and that it was very comprehensive in terms of, you're going to get this information, here's what to do. We recommend that you get an attorney and the options there. So, I mean, I think we all, as you said, we all learned through the process and got,
what is this process?
a lot more, just a lot more involved and kind of understood what the kind of education that people needed. So,
Did you actually get a letter from Dominion or ACP?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we count the knock on the door at night. Yeah,
Can we
with
pause for a
with the
second? How do you
papers.
turn these lights on?
Because some people immediately went into action and called it and got the attorney.
Right, right.
And some people were just gobsmacked.
Yeah.
I needed more light. All right. Sorry. We're good.
Maybe I'll say that.
Yeah.
Because one of our questions that, I had sent you all was, if you got a call from a friend living in another state, and they had gotten a registered letter, telling them a corporation wants to build something through their land, using eminent domain, and the people don't know what to do about it. What would you recommend that person do as a result of getting that letter?
We'll definitely recommend that they get an attorney. I think there was a lot of confusion about attorneys, and they would take too big a percentage. People didn't understand that it was, a percentage of the amount. Dominion offers you amount, and then they negotiate above that. It was a percentage of between those two, not like the whole amount. So a lot of people in our area, in our part of the county, were concerned about the money, and they were just concerned about what it would mean, attorney. But I mean, I did recommend that everyone get an attorney, and that was really important. And it wasn't just about the compensation that they may have to be negotiated. It was also, if it came to that point, what sort of parameters on the pipeline on your land and what could happen to your land. I mean, I think that was a really important piece of education. It wasn't just a compensation.
Because
There's a
that's
lot.
going on now with them not wanting to take.
Right, right.
So that's an important thing to sort of know up front, to negotiate up front. Well, what's going to happen if this thing goes belly up and the pipes are on my place?
Right. And there's a huge difference if you look at the easements, the people who had an attorney and negotiated, and the ones that just took what Dominion gave them. I mean, that's an area where it's the big difference of what happens, to the land. But there was hesitancy to get attorneys, and there were some attorneys that were more interested in working in our part of the county, and so that was what we tried to do, was to, make those connections. But not everyone, in our area ended up with an attorney, and as I said, you can really see the difference.
Yeah. Did you want to follow up on that?
If we're looking back and trying to tell another community what they could consider about the lawyers, I looked at Jane Cleave's model now, and they're talking about hiring a lawyer that advises people, and that people pay a share, and so they have a central lawyer. But are there other ways that we could have done it, or that another community could do it? So should we have had a lawyer that we hired just to advise people on lawyers? And could the lawyer we hired handle the issues on easement, on survey, and held off people hiring the eminent domain lawyer, so that when they got to that point, our lawyer would be advising them on what to consider about an eminent domain lawyer. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and we were all faced and had to tell people, we're not a lawyer, you have to get your own. But would there have been a better way?
So to have it more coordinated instead of people going out and hiring individual lawyers. I think that could have been effective. I mean, I'd have to really think about that. You'd have to get like one or just a couple of attorneys that were willing to work with everybody. But you're talking more advice, not really working with people on eminent domain.
Well, at that point, an eminent domain lawyer is further down the road.
Right.
But all the early stuff on fighting the easements or fighting the surveys, on just what kind of a lawyer should you be considered in the future, it's just that people that had no lawyer were left sort of in a bad position.
So that way you could have addressed the people who didn't sign up with an eminent domain lawyer. So from that perspective, I think that, would be a good approach.
And there is a huge amount of information just at your fingertips on the web. Just to Google, what should I do, or eminent domain lawyer, or there's a ton of eminent domain lawyers in other states and all over who are dying to tell you what your problems will be and what you should do first, and probably at the end of it, it's like, yes, you should hire an eminent domain lawyer, but there's a lot of information just out there to be had for nothing before you step into somebody's office at $250 an hour.
My name is Wisteria Johnson, and I'm the fifth generation I am the fifth generation of Harris Cove. My grandchildren are the seventh generation. So technically I say, because of some interest in my seventh generation, that we're 7 generations on the land, and we are. Some of them, all of them come to visit. Most of their decisions are around what's happening on the farm, so I feel good about that. Okay, so if I get a call from a friend, and the way I approach it would be 2 different ways. If it's a friend or just somebody saying, hey, I heard you went through the same thing. So your question said friend, so I'm going to go ahead and speak to that. The first thing I'm going to have to do is just let them talk, because they're going to be angry, and all of their anger is going to sort of get in the way of whatever the procedure that you're going to be talking about. So emotionally, you got to deal with that first. The fear, you got to deal with that first. So the best thing to do is just let them talk. The old psychological thing. All right. Then the next thing, the first thing, the thing that happened, and this is in combination with Janice, because she's been my right-hand person the whole time. So what we did first was we got in contact with a good eminent domain lawyer. That was our first thing that we did, and it's a good thing that we did, because at least I felt like we had some power. And that's the important thing, is you're going to try to not only feel okay emotionally in terms of getting most of the negative stuff out that's going to blind you, okay, because you got to think about what to do. And this is kind of like you're going to have a physical, the warning is you're going to have a physical hurt. I did, because my land, the land that I had, this was more than just my today. It was my ancestors they were coming after, right? So, and it was my mountains they were coming after. So I got really emotional about the whole thing. So I got grounded by Janice. She helped us get in contact, all of us got in contact with the eminent domain lawyer. And it was good because they were there for support. Our particular lawyer showed up at all the group meetings, which was very supportive. We knew he knew. We knew he felt it. So again, that was someone else sharing the pain, and with him, he had the knowledge, or with them, they had the knowledge. So I began to feel stronger. The power was being given back to me. Then Janice did a real neat thing in terms of strategy. You know how you want to face the enemy? Because at that point, this was this huge monster coming at me, and I I didn't know I was dealing with my children. I was dealing with their fear, their hostility, and what they were ultimately going to get themselves in trouble for. Okay, so I had to face the enemy. Janice helped me do that. And the way we did that was that we started recognizing the people that were actually coming on the land, calling them by names, giving them names, making sure that we were going to be there. Also, in terms of the way that the route first came through, the biggest thing was we made an attempt to go and talk to Old Dominion. And in doing, not Old Dominion, Dominion, Dominion Energy. And in doing that, we put a face to a lot of so-called enemies and found out they were human, and they found out we were human. So we were able to negotiate a little bit there. And the only reason I was able to negotiate was because of the expanse of land we had, that we could ask them to move from one spot to another. And neither spot was really good. You know what I'm saying? They went from the bottom that was going to interfere with all the farming to the mountain where the rocks and the boulders would be coming down. So both ways were terrible. But at that particular point, to me, it was like, okay, a little less painful. Okay? From that point on, when Dominion came, I paid attention to the letters, their names, you know. When Dominion came, the biggest thing that I learned, well, with the letter of intent, we took direction from eminent domain lawyer. He was able to tell us what they could do and couldn't do. So I felt like we were armed, that I could go out, or we could go out, my husband who's 6'5", we could go out and speak to them what we knew, okay? And could call up our lawyer again and say, okay, can we take any action if this isn't done? We never had to do that. And the reason we didn't have to do that is because, again, we faced the enemy, called them by name. When they came up, we had conversations. We offered cold bottled water on hot days, and we sat around and we talked. So we put a face to them, okay? Then we realized that when they were coming to survey the land, it was, am I taking this question right?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't want to, I'm going to stop right here in a few minutes. When the surveyors came, we made sure that somebody was there with them. And they could talk, we could ask lots of questions, and we could talk exactly what was going on. And in doing that, when the well person came, they talked to each other. So they know what kind of person you're going to be. However, when the subcontractors started coming to actually lay the flags on the land and the path, that was a problem. And the reason it was a problem because there was a lot, we were known to have, the county was known to be resisting it and to be smart, I guess. So these subcontractors are from other states. Mm-hmm. We never saw a license in Virginia. Okay, so this whole theory about they're going to employ local people was full of crap, because every truck that we saw and every car that we saw was a license plate out of town. We finally got around to talking. There were 2 or 3 situations I had kept contact persons and numbers. There were 2 or 3 situations that occurred that I actually got on the phone while they were there and had to correct the people in terms of where they thought they were supposed to be going, which is what we didn't think. They were immediately told what they needed to do correctly, just like it was, you got to stay on top of that. When you're walking with them, you got to stay on top of that, But keeping that contact number, and that changes too. So all you got to do is, even with the contact number, you ask them, well, who should I talk to? And they'll give it to you. But you got to put it down and you got to persevere. If somebody says, I don't know what you're talking about, you got to say, well, somebody's got to tell me what's up. I got men on on my land. I'm not going to let them come because they're not doing what I was told they were going to do. Same thing with the no-shows. Took me a while to learn this. But initially, when they said they were going to come and they didn't come, I let it slide a couple of times. And then I found myself being inconvenient quite a bit. So I got on the phone again. And I said, listen, you guys said you're going to be out here. You got to be out here. So this is the magic with what Janice told me. and directed us with putting a face to the monster, faces to the monster, contact numbers, and making sure you stay on top of it.
We did in our community, and I have to thank one U.S. senator and a state senator. They did contact Dominion on our behalf, and there were arranged meetings with our community. And what Wisteria, that is how the relationships developed. And they didn't do these routes, like these engineers with all this knowledge. I mean, they just looked at a map and so I think that's important to understand. I mean, that it can be beneficial to sit down and talk with these people who are the employees, for the company. I didn't view them as our, prime enemies. We didn't like what they did, but a lot of them were doing their jobs and were interested. And in our case, we did get removed from the route fairly early after we got put on, because they didn't know that they had routed it through a rare natural heritage site. There's a rare swamp that Doug Coleman with the Wintergreen Nature Foundation will tell them, and did tell them, has been there. It's called the Tongue of the Piedmont. It should be in Tidewater. It has been around in Nelson County since it was, a completely different terrain, and they routed right through, and that was affected our land. Wisteria and I have adjoining land kind of across the road, and the state became involved, and I didn't direct, but said, this is really not the best place for a route. So that's an example. I mean, the people came out, they looked at it, the state sent a letter saying, this is not a good route, you're going to destroy, a very important area. And it was then designated as a state conservation site. So that made the whole change. But if there hadn't been a dialogue, then those things really wouldn't have happened. So I think in our community, we maybe had some success with having people from the company understand what's going on this land and the family. I actually had one employee tell me, well, I wouldn't want this this close to my house, because the route was, when it was right. It went through our garden. And the choice was, if you moved it, on the study corridor, then it got closer to a long-standing African-American family next to us. I mean, there was no way you could do this. And not have some pretty horrible things happen. So that I think is a success story. And to not be afraid to talk to your elected officials. I mean, we're their constituents, we elect them. And you have to be relentless. And we found a staff person with Senator Warner, who was pretty sympathetic to our area. So I think people need to understand that. And I know other people had different, maybe not as good an experience, but we did. And there were sit downs. So, well, I used to work on Capitol Hill. Okay, but that's another point to be made.
Right.
Is you look in your community and you find out what the talents and expertise of people are. I mean, there's going to be people who have press experience. There's going to be people who are organizers. There's we had historians. We had amazing people with environmental knowledge. We had people with connections politically. So we use that, and these are people who weren't on the route directly, but they saw it as their community being impacted. And everybody kind of had their different assignments. We did a tremendous amount of research. So I think that's a message that I would give to people is find out, when it's established who's on your route, get people together, figure out what their interests are, what their skills or background, and you may be surprised at how effective you can be.
And it made it a lot easier that you had an organization early on to sort of filter like a matrix within which to carry out all this research. And the other thing is, I don't think, like you were saying, that they just drew a line. You should never assume technical superiority of because they're they're just guys drawing a line where they think it's going to be the easiest, and it's up to you to it's up to you to fight it if you feel like your whole community doesn't want it, but it's also up to you to change that line, because they're not going to spend. They got our expertise for nothing. They're
That's
not going to
true.
pay experts in history, experts in botany to figure out where the root is. It's up to you to do that.
Yeah, I want to come back to some things you were saying, but on this particular topic, we know now that Dominion, or ACP, was mandated by federal law to be aware of impact on historic resources. And I know, because of the experience of the Historical Foundation, we had Bob Carter as president at the time, who had worked for the Division of Historic Resources,
Right.
and was well aware of both federal law and the existing community.
The process.
And the process.
Yeah.
So, you above all would be aware of the historic nature of this particular part of the county.
Area. Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
You mean in terms of the
Of Warminster and the settlement
well,
that occurred there.
right? This Warminster was settled by my ancestors in the 1700s, and had been, but it wasn't. It was around the same time that the Historical Society became the sponsor of, and I became the applicant for, the Warminster Rural Historic District, which that was one of the reasons that I met you guys too, because we were all kind of moving in this, doing whatever we could to, figure this out. And I think it is important to be mindful of the history of our ancestors, our Native American ancestors, our Black ancestors, all of whom are kind of still, hanging around there, in the area, and it's important to understand the power of that. But it's not incumbent on somebody who wants to put a pipeline through to do the research for you. You have to do the research and get it to them. I mean, we all went to talk at every water commission, department of this, department of that. We all went to speak, and as this thing moved along through 6 or 7 years, as it moved along through 6 or 7 years, our little speeches got a little better each time. I mean, once you looked at what Dominion was handing you about all these fabulous jobs that were going to come, and then you did the research, and you realized that after the pipeline was built, in the entire state of Virginia, there would be 17 permanent jobs.
Right.
That was pretty powerful, and so you began to be able to incorporate the things that you were learning as you went along, and so you became a more powerful speaker as you went to all these meetings, and even if it seems like you're not making an impact, and even if they make the wrong decision after you do it, which they did, the water department caved many times, it's still on the record and it's still out there. And so when it goes before a judge, that's part of the process, and it's part of the information that they are then privy to. And actually, I think we educated the judges that we got as we went through the process. Because didn't we seem to be getting the same judges in the same courts every time? And so they learned about what was going on here and what was going on with maybe tunneling under the Appalachian Trail, and and they became able to make more informed decisions in at each step, and so it kind of built up.
And you're relying on these judges to be human too. That's the other thing, because there were one or two that I recognized as we were going through, and I can't even remember their names now, that were making a decision in our favor. You did some stuff that was very effective in the very beginning down there, close to in Winjana.
Right, yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier
before
before
you
you,
did.
how that whole process got started, yeah.
So
and
what
that-
she
yeah.
did basically was take what, I'm sorry, what's your first name? I know you.
Cabell.
Cabell.
That's your last name.
That's my first name.
Oh, okay. Cabell.
My
All
last
right.
name is Smith.
You know
All
those
right.
Cabells.
So that's what Cabell was talking about. What had happened was that, and this is the best inspiration for me, was in the very beginning, was that you could fight. Number one. Initially, I didn't know. I just thought I could just lay there and everything was going to roll over me, except for the kids. They had their own ideas what they were going to do, which was, don't want to talk about it. But anyhow, what I want to say is that you brought it to the attention of the public too. And that's the other thing that supports. If bring it to the attention of the public, then it does go on record somehow,
Yeah.
a little bit bolder than it was before. And so when it is accumulating, then you know you got this resistance that's going on. And these people, when the people who are in those decisions, when they see that there are people caring in numbers and are going to be negatively
Huge.
affected in numbers, then the ones who are human can make the difference in a vote. And it only takes one vote sometimes. So sometimes you feel like that whole effort was just to make sure that everybody who could be human would get the idea of the ones that were in the decision
Just
process.
to put this into some kind of context, what we're really talking about here is these cases that you're talking about, these are permit cases, right? The State Water Control Board
Right.
is saying,
Right.
to Dominion, hold on
Right.
here, we're not sure we're gonna give you this permit to
Right.
cross this
Right.
particular.
It's going to
piece of
slow the
Right.
process
It's gonna-
anyway.
So, these are challenges to that permitting process, correct? And
Right.
that's where you're saying public opinion and humanizing the whole effort
Right.
is important.
Imperative.
Because it does affect what kinds of decisions.
Imperative.
Because judges read newspapers too.
And some of them are human too. Right.
Advice I would have for other people is, yes, show up as much as you can. And I can just see Dominion's face. Oh God, here they are again. There's all, and I think that's a huge message, is being relentless. And I like to say being a pain to the company. I really do think that we were really instrumental in slowing. We slowed the
Friends of
timeline
Nelson-
down.
Nelson
I mean,
County.
by so many people denying survey and the lawyers, and just the constant. And sure, it was tiring, but I think when you look back, I think it was really very instrumental. And there's also one thing I just want to say about public education and press. I think some people get intimidated that they aren't press people and they can't do this sophisticated PR campaign. You don't necessarily need that. I mean, there is a role for that, but I mean, we were pretty folksy. I don't know if you remember the original in Wingina, the poster board that I made. I took the map of the Dominion route and put in like red poster pins for the historical sites, and another one for African American, and another one. And that thing, I mean, it was in the Richmond Times. I mean, that thing got a lot of play. And then I did another one for the wetlands that we posted, photographs on. And I think kind of folksy and real human, and it played to our advantage that we weren't some fancy PR firm, that we cared enough, and this is what we could pull together. We did the pictures showing the mountains and the boulders and the water, and took those to the state water. And I think that's a message to people, kind of use what you have. And I think more
That's
local
what grassroots means.
is actually better than, and you don't need tons of money to do that. It's just kind of from the heart. So.
In the beginning, some of these things are needed to know though, because I didn't know what could be exempted until I got to reading and talking. I didn't know historical sites would make a difference. I didn't know swamps and real areas or in habitats. I know at some point we had to do the letter to the FERC. And there I learned, okay, these are the things we need to be talking about, because somebody gave me the guideline. And I think that's something that we need initially. That first call. I mean, those, to me, the first call needs to get most of what you need to know. Okay, and that's the reason I think I love this idea, because there are things that the average landowner doesn't have any idea about because they've not had the experience like I didn't. So if you can tell folk this is what you need to know, and do it up front. The other thing is getting to the local government. I think we were pretty slow, I thought. I mean, maybe because we did get to them, but that small body of people that you initially get, even if it's 2 or 3 people, go to your local government and tell them you don't like it, you don't want it, As far as the sheriff's department, I remember early on, that's not much they can do, but we went to them and we said, what can you do, right? And they slowly let us know nothing. But at least it put it on their agenda that we may be having some problems. So if we make the call, then they know, okay, this is what this is about. Because sometimes sheriff's department don't even know what's going on politically. So, those things that you can take the initiative to do, right?
There was trust. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's important to understand that the local government will be being courted by Dominion also.
Yeah.
And so the local government is going to feel like, oh, we're going to get all these jobs. We're going to look great.
Right.
So you need to do the research to find out what the actual story is, so you can educate the local government and then educate the public and then whatever. But they're being courted too, and they're being told you're going to look like a big job giver around here, but it ain't so.
It ain't so.
That was one of the huge myths, and you're right. I mean, I got so tired of the West Virginia license plates, Pennsylvania, Texas, and there will be trespassing. There was trespassing in our area, and so I would see the trucks, and I would stand, and I had a list of who had allowed survey and who had denied, and most people had denied. But one time the Pennsylvania truck came and it started going up this hill, kind of across from us. And I said, where are you going? And I pulled out the map and said, you don't have permission to go up very far, and so it shouldn't take you long. And I'm just going to stand here until you come back down. And if
She
you
was
don't,
vigilant. She was the
and if
community
you don't,
watchdog.
we're gonna complain and go through the proper route. And then he goes, well, what's your name? I'm going to let Dominion know. I said, it's okay. They know me. no issue.
Please do.
It actually got to that level of vigilance.
Yeah.
But you had to have the information, a little map.
Right.
And,
You have to have the information. You need to know what they can do and can't do. All
Right.
those things with something like this. Even if somebody decided to write a book. Hello. It could be a manual, actually, in terms of the initial things you need to do. And this is before you start doing a big organization. That little small group, 3 or 4 group, they're going to get the members if they go ahead and start. I mean, it was two women, I think, that initially started ours.
At Friends in Nelson?
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 that were approached that sort of put up the warning.
Yeah.
Who were they? I can't. You? Okay.
Just one of them.
Yeah, and there was a woman who spoke. I can't remember. It wasn't Charlotte, was it? But anyway, they were the ones who started sending up the red flags. And then people came. And before you get to the Friends of Nelson organization, you can be doing these things. You can be knowing what your rights are, being a watchdog, watchdog for your own land. You can know what they can do and can't do. You can know when you get ready to do your FERC letter, which everybody, I guess, has to do at some point, even though that's a no-go. You at least can put together, which we were able to, in my mind, put together for the first time, what they could do and what they couldn't do. And that's because there were directions in terms of what they could do and couldn't do. Somebody finally gave me a hard copy of these are the things they can do and can't do. So if you see them being transgressed, is that the word, on your land, then that's what you go ahead and identify and put on the letter, which is what happened. But I think that first phone call is so important, and it's because you give them power. They can work through the anger and the bitterness and all that stuff. But if we could give them a book, like I say, or a video, say, okay, so-and-so has video here, put this in. But I think a book would be more straightforward, more, this is checklist kind of thing,
That's why
that you
we're
could
doing
do.
both.
Oh,
Oh,
great,
you are
great.
great.
And the other thing is, there's jobs that everybody can do, whether it's
Right.
helping out at the library to help people write the FERC letters.
Right.
I don't live here all the time, but I can do research.
Right.
So that's what I did. Also, you can be sneaky. I bought 5 shares of Dominion stock, so I would be,
Went to go to the meetings.
so I would be able to go to the meetings.
Right.
And then I wrote to everybody on the board of directors, and I said, I really, as a shareholder, I really I'm really at a loss as to why this is still a good project. Tell me why you think it's a good project, because for this, and this reason, it seems like kind of not a good idea for as a shareholder looking at this. It doesn't seem like a good
Awesome.
idea. So
You had the inside.
I had no idea. It probably went right in the round file,
Right,
but it
but
made
you
me
were
feel
there
good.
and you knew. And not only that, but I think that information was shared at some meetings, because I know that we had some shareholders that had the inside scoop, and some of that information was shared at the meetings, because I remember that. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember, we got
Whatever
people.
you have to do,
Yeah.
however deep you have to go,
Yeah.
just go there.
But
And
just to give you guys some context for your roles in this, we've talked to Tom Hadwin, who was one of the first authorities to challenge the need for the pipeline. We just did an interview with him a couple of days ago. We will be talking to Greg Buppert from this
Southern
environmental law center, and
a
Rick
saint.
Cornelius, who laid out what the legal strategy was pretty early in this entire process. There are all these different threads that have to come together, both in this video and this manual that we're trying to put together. And yours is a very important one, because sometimes there are some people. I was asked by John Mingle, he's the author. Was there a turning point that made Dominion go away? And I said, I don't think so. I think it was an accretion of a lot of different
Yeah.
And I agree with
things
that.
were going on.
The whole relentless.
But there is a theory that some people still hold to this day that it was the Southern Environmental Law Center, the Sierra Club, and the other legal
Right.
entities that were fighting it in court that forced Dominion to reevaluate the need for the project. But Greg Buppert has said publicly that it was public pressure
Right.
that really turned the tide.
He did say
And
that.
there's an interplay between the public pressure and the legal
Legal.
strategy that we need to get at
Yeah.
to give people hope that don't just leave it to the lawyers. That's basically the message is
You can't.
that you're giving.
The lawyers, they need our input and our information, which was one of my pieces of advice. Yes, I mean, the environmental law firms were critical in this, and support them however you can, financially if you're able, or providing information. I know daughter did a video that was on the Southern Environmental Law Center website. So that's an example of another way. But I agree completely that it's the interplay.
We're
that was
their
successful.
research team.
Yeah.
We're their research team.
But-
And I just want to say, so awful, that if you buy things from Amazon, you can go to something called Amazon Smile and give to your favorite charity. And my favorite charity is the Southern Environmental Law Center. So we can
Oh,
support them in a lot of ways.
Or just directly, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to donate a car to them, old car, but it didn't work. But I ended up being able to give it to the Virginia Sierra Club, which I felt really good about. They were huge in terms of the support, and also providing. We provided information and support, and then it was reciprocal. They provided for us.
Well,
on
we
the
felt
roadmap. Yeah.
energized by every case that so it was kind of this building of
Whether it was good or bad, it was still energy,
Yeah,
right?
It was still energy, right?
Yeah, I agree. But now the law, what you were saying, Woody, I agree with. Okay, but don't underestimate the power of the legal services in terms of empowering the individual landowner, because we're there. And sometimes we're there in a bubble, and we need the power to keep doing the individual thing that we did just to protect ourselves.
One of the big problems, I guess, or challenges, there were people like yourself and yourself who've got sufficient background and knowledge and inspiration to fight and to challenge and to ask questions. There were a lot of people who got those notices who didn't have that background and I won't call it willingness, because I think it's more a lack of knowledge or
Fear.
You said it.
Fear, a ton of fear.
No,
So-
lack of knowledge too.
Yeah.
So how do you deal, let's say 100 people in a community get notices and 40 of them say, all right, I guess I gotta sign this. What do you do about that?
Well, that's where I think that what worked well in Nelson, we had the umbrella of Friends of Nelson, but then I'm a firm believer then in organizing within your community, which is what I did in China and then in my own community. And that's when, Friends of Nelson provided the list of who was on the route, so we knew that, and some contact, but that's where you just start hustling and contacting people. And if you go local, it's easier to do. And yes, there were people who were just overwhelmed or just walked away because it was just didn't understand. But we were able to talk with a lot of people and go through not everyone, but a lot of people. It was just that one. I think we divvied up the list. We had other people and did that. You have to do that personal contact. They're not going to respond to a letter that comes in the mail that's 2 pages that explains the pipeline. It has to be I'm in your situation, you're not alone. And that's what my recommendation would be. You've got the more local and grassroots you can go.
Because
Yeah.
what you're saying is giving people information, and then the more information you have, even if it's just a tiny thing at first, information is really powerful.
Right.
And makes you feel like, oh, like you were saying, I can breathe again for today.
We
You know,
did
I
a
can-
yeah.
Yeah.
We did a list. Oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
we did a list. We had like a communication tree in our area, which was everything that came down. Like, here's the surveys are coming. Other people said there's trespassing. This is Dominion's filed this. There's a public hearing coming up. So that is critical. Yeah.
I think the
success.
underlying, and I have a recommendation toward that, because I would have easily been one of those people. I don't know, my personality wouldn't allow me to, but I could have in other words, the lack of information. That's the reason I love this idea of the book. It is so imperative that everybody gets a hand on the lack of what to do. And I tell you why. Sometimes sitting in those meetings, they got a lot of anger, and it's good for everybody to get their anger out. But I leave sometimes in the very beginning thinking, is that going to help me? So getting the information out initially is very important. Now, I really feel, as far as organization is concerned, I see it initially as you start doing for yourself. Then you use a small group and you start getting local, hitting your local people, going to talk to your neighbors, getting them informed to what you know. And with a book by your side, that can really help you out a great deal. The second thing is the organization piece on a larger scale, like Friends of Nelson. And the reason you have to realize that's going to take some time, and you need to be doing stuff before that happens. Now, with the Friends of Nelson, I piggyback on what both of these ladies have said. If you can figure out the compartmentalization, is that the word I want to say, where you can get a coordinator, you see, for each of these things that you think you're going to need, the groups you're going to need. Like, for instance, public relations for one, the newspaper. Little things like public relation newspaper. If the newspaper's coming around to the landowners and that's what you're trying to do, then you got to tell that landowner, what's this about? What you can say that can be really effective, not just sit there and waddle, because I think that's what I did initially, my first interview. I was feeling sorry for myself. And all that article said was, I'm feeling sorry for myself, where I could have hit some other points like blah, 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 and been more effective. And it went to Richmond Times. So with that kind of population, I should have been more specific. That's my thing. The other thing is when you're talking to your state reps and your local reps, you got somebody heading that. I would love to see a coordination of the lawyers, the individual lawyers, where they're all saying broadly the same thing, but they're still representing individually. The other thing I thought about was, I don't know, it takes too much time to read my own writing, but education. Initially, the education piece, even if you just have to have somebody who has that manual, who can keep pushing the point and being there and being vigilant, like Janice was. Also, even the idea of neighborhood watch,